Hello everyone, welcome to What If Deku Had Thor's Ability the God of Thunder Part 3. Part 19. Previously the fight between the heroes and the villains, and the death of the serpent, Shigaraki, Dabi and villains like Nine and all the villains there. And in the end Izuku also died but was revived back Thor. And when he came back All Might and Momo hugged him and the heroes were cheating for the victory while Aden was crying for his son. Now onto the story. Izuku stood up while still being hugged by Momo and All Might and said, "Guys, if you could, can I get a bit of a room to breathe?" Both did as this and moved a bit away, and Aden walked to Izuku and said, "My son sent you back, didn't he?" Izuku while looking down, said he pushed me away and then turned to some sort of dust or he faded away. Aden then looked at him with an open mouth and said, "So I was right?" Izuku then asked right how. Aden then says he made you a real god, up to the fight you were a demigod, but now you are a real god, a real Asgaradian. But that he started walking away and Izuku asked, "Wait, my friends and the soldiers that died today, what about them?" Aden then lifted his spear and a bright light appeared on it and when it was gone Bakugo and Shoto were there. And every hero that had lost their life or had a wound was healed. Then Aden said, "There you go, now me and my army will go back to Asgard and mourn my son's death." And teleported out of there with his army. While Bakugo and Shoto were feeling weird and said, "Man, that was scary, you actually killed us, dude." Izuku said had to be done, sorry. Then Bakugo said, "I forgive you," and Shoto soon followed, saying me too, and just then Izuku called his hammer and aimed it at Present Mick and said, "Leave his body." Meanwhile Present Mick said, "What are you talking about, leave my body?" Izuku then sent a bolt at Present Mick and when the bolt hit him a purple dog-like creature appeared out of him and Izuku then hit it again with his hammer and killed it and said that was the traitor. He was sent by Gore the God Butcher to find info on us, while Izawa and the others were treating to Present Mick, who while heavily breathing said, "Thanks kid, I couldn't control my body, well that thing had control over me." Izuku just said, "No need, now can everyone just move away from the place and maybe go outside the city so I can rebuild it." Then everyone did just that and Izuku recreated the entire city. It took some effort, but he was able to, and he also realized that since he became a real god, he was much better at controlling his powers and soon he walked out to UA, where the others were. And he said, "Alright everyone, I hope I don't have to meet all of you at once again ever." The people confused said, "That's rude," and Izuku just laughed and said, "I meant I don't meet you all at once like this, because right now you are an army ready for war and I am done with a full-out war. Don't want another and bye for now because I am going home and will rest for a week because I have the provisional license exam in a week." But that Izuku flew away and went to his house, while everyone there looked at each other and said, "Yay, we all deserve a long and nice break," and went their own way, and in the end only the top heroes and the class 1 and 1B remained and they looked at each other and said, "Izuku had a nice idea, let's do the same and we will meet in 1 week." Everyone nodded at this and went home. Now for people who might think this is unrealistic, well this is what happens after real war. People are so emotionally drained that they just say things without much emotion and go their separate way. Meanwhile somewhere in a large underground facility, two men were talking. One had a black mask and the other looked like a frog. The masked man said, "So when do we move?" And the frog looked at him and said, "In 5 weeks. We will take on both the new god and his father." And the masked man laughed at this and said, "Finally, I can take revenge from All Might for ruining my life." Then the other man said, "Yes, you will have your moment, you just need to wait while all the pieces fall into place." Then the two men started laughing manically. Chapter 20. The New Start. Izuku was getting ready for the provisional license exam and he heard his mother call out to him and said, "Izuku, you should get going for the exam." Izuku turned around and with a tired face said, "I am getting ready," and then Inko said, "Oh, well hurry up," and Izuku just quickly got ready and jumped out of the window and flew to the school, and when he arrived he saw everyone, especially Bakugo and Shoto, in a tired expression and said, "Huh, looks like the aftermath of the war finally hit everyone." And they all in a complete sync said, "Yay, no shit Sherlock," and just then Izawa came and said, "Everyone move, we are leaving for the exam." Hearing this everyone just walked with Izawa to the bus and got in and reached the exam location. They all got off and Izuku turned around and say, "Alright guys, let's do this plus ultra." A different voice also yelled and all the class 1A turned around to see a kid standing there who introduced himself as Yoshindo and said, "Sorry, I just always wanted to do this." Like plus ultra is the 2NS most famous hero phrase in the world. Izuku just looked at him and said, "You're welcome, can we get to the exam now?" And suddenly his eyes went wide and he looked at Izawa and said, "Where is Venom?" Izawa then looked down at his phone and said, "He should be here right about now." And soon Venom jumped down to the group and took off the symbiote and said, "Hey, everyone, how are you? Sorry for not helping during the war. I was sent on a mission overseas by THR Hero Commission Board." Izuku sighed and said, "No problem, now let's get this over with. I am feeling super lazy," and with that Izawa said, "It's hard to argue with his assessment," and then he heard a voice call him out and this made him shiver. He slowly turned around seeing Miss Joke coming to him and hid behind Izuku. Meanwhile milliseconds Joke said, "Oh that hurts, why are you hiding from your wife?" Shouta. This made Izuku and everyone turned towards Izawa who said, "Don't lie Joke." And milliseconds Joke in reply to this showed a ring on her finger and seeing this Yoshiaka Venom gasped and said, "And here I thought he was a virgin ass hobo eh." Then Bakugo continued it by saying, "We all thought the same," and Izawa just said, "Huh, so is that how you see me, you ungrateful bucks?" Milliseconds Joke in a serious tone then said, "Shouta cussing in front of children, just you come home today," and Izawa then shivered and said, "Sorry, like queen I stepped out of line, but please don't step on me," and with that Izuku looked at Izawa and said, "I lost all respect I had for you sensei," and with that Izawa said, "Well then go and all you." The class sighed and Kirishima said, "Guys let's go we have an exam to complete," and all the class members ran inside and the presentation for the exam started. "Which I will try my best to explain but sorry for my talent." The announcer said in this exam there will be 2 parts, first one being a battle royale, you would have 3 targets on your body, and if all 3 are hit by these balls you will be out, and if you defeat 3 people you advance. Only the first 100 people to take out 3 opponents will pass this round, and the second round will be explained afterwards. Because if I explain it now you all will only think of what you will do in the next one and won't be fully present in this one. Now go to the arena. And with that everyone left the room and went to the arena and Yoshi looked at Izuku and said, "This will be easy," and Izuku asked how so and Venom replied saying, "I mean Venom can just absorb these targets," and Izuku said, "Well lucky you, I plan on defeating 200 people in the first minute Yoshi," and the whole class 1A looked at him and said nice. But Bakugo said, "Listen, I will go and do my own, you take 200 people and help our classmates." Izuku nodded and said, "So who's going solo?" Yoshi, Bakugo and Shoto, as well as Kirishima raised their hands and Izuku said okay. Have fun, and beware of a guy from a school his name is Inasa Yurashi. Hearing the name Todoroki said, "I know him he is the person who scored second in the recommended exams but for some reason didn't join UA." Izuku took the information and thought saying, "Everyone stay away from him, he's bad news." Bakugo hearing this said, "Alright same with Venom and others." And at that moment the siren is blown and the students got ready to fight and the solo squad ran to do their things. Meanwhile Izuku just used his telekinesis to capture 120 people and brought them all to them and they're everyone except Bakugo, Shoto, Venom and Kirishima all eliminated 3 people each. Just then all the other hero school arrived and Shindo said, "It's time for the crashing of UA," and he then saw that all the class 1A members there had already passed and said, "Well, so you cheated your way in," and Izuku just looked at him and said, "Listen, we just want to get out license so we can officially help the next time there is an otherworldly problem." And Shindo said, "You're right," and turns around and before walking away says, "Thank you, I heard you actually died to kill that monster, you're a true hero and you deserve to get your license. All of you," and walked away. And class 1A just went to the waiting room. After a while they heard an announcement saying a student has just eliminated 300 people at once. And hearing this Izuku said, "Inasa, I told you," and soon a tall man with a winter consume came in and walked past Izuku and sat down. And now let's take a look at Bakugo and Kirishima along with Todoroki. Kirishima while walking looked at them and asked, "So what is it like on the other side?" Bakugo and Shoto both looked at him and sighed saying, "Well, we were in Valhalla and met Thor, and also we saw Izuku arriving at the gates and being pushed back, well there we were being treated too by hot girls. They even gave bath to us," and Kirishima said, "Sound like you are missing them," and Bakugo said, "You think, I mean I got to have Hex," and Kirishima said, "Wait what?" and Shoto said, "It's true, it was heaven we were pleased in every single way. It was better than being alive." Hearing this Kirishima said, "Looks like you two are eager to die," and they both just nodded and suddenly Bakugo yelled, "Get back," and jumped back himself as a heat blob fell in front of them. The trio looked forward to see a student who was holding about 13 students hostage and meatballs. And Bakugo said, "Well we only need to stop one guy now and we win," and the other two nodded and Todoroki made a ice ramp to a little to the right and Kirishima started running up it. Meanwhile Shoto fired his fire at the meat guy, making him jump down where Bakugo who had goten under him, blasted him in the face sending him up and Kirishima then jumped off the ramp and punched the guy in the face and making him fall down and when he stood up Todoroki was in front of him with a fiery fist and punched him yelling flash fire fist and knocked him out. Then all the captured people turned to normal, but Todoroki quickly froze them. And then the trio eliminated 9 people and left the remaining 4 to do their thing. And went to the waiting room. Meanwhile Venom was sneaking around taking out people silently as to not draw attention and had taken 2 people already. He then saw a man who was about to seriously hurt someone with his quirk, which appeared to be vibration and jumped down and said, "Hey, you could hurt someone by using the quirk in a rocky area like this." And Shindo looked at him and said, "Oh sorry, you're Venom right, I kind of want to fight you." But Venom refused saying, "I won't fight you right now because you'd win, now and always." With it he jumped away and Shindo thought him maybe sounds and vibrations are his weakness. and he then got another person and passed. Saw Venom in the distance who also eliminated another person, and just then the siren was blown, and an announcement was made that the second part of the exam will be explained now, so all the person who passed the first part, please come to the conference room. And when all the 100 examinees were there, the announcer looked at all of them and said, okay, so this section would have you all reduce civilians from a damaged city after a villain attack. Now the civilian are our hired men who will act as they are in danger, and you will have to save them, and they will decide how many points you lose. So what that means is you will start with 100 points, and they will reduce your points if you don't do it well, and the passing score is 60, so good luck and now go. And as the gates opened and everyone ran out and quickly Izuku shouted, everyone listen. And everyone turned to him, and he said, okay, I will cover all the civilian on the right side of the city with a barrier that will protect and heal them, so people like Bakugo who have destructive quirk can help them get out. And I will also put a barrier around the site where the injured will be brought, and someone said, why not cover all the civilians? And Izuku looked at him and said, then what will people do when I am not there to help? Right now I am helping half who can't do rescue properly, and leaving the rest to work on their own. And with that he flew off and started hovering in the sky with Inasa who looked and said, so you're also scouting for possible enemy? And Izuku said yes. Meanwhile down on the ground, Venom had just reached a man who was stuck under a large amount of rubble, and to help the man he said, Venom go and attack to him, and help him get out and heal him as well. And Venom did just that, he left Yoshi's body and went and combined with the other person, and also healed him bringing him out, and then merged with Yoshi again, and the man looked at Yoshi and said smart decision plus 5 points, and he was then taken to the medical site. Meanwhile Momo's team was helping people by her lifting all the rubble with her telekinesis and helping the person get out and then healed them and said, it will be okay, Iida take her to the medical side, and Iida complied and used the speed force to get all the civilians Momo's team and other teams had saved to the medical site. And this earned everyone good amount of point. And now there were only 10 minutes left till the end of the exam. And suddenly a loud boom was heard as one wall was broken, and some goons along with Gang Orca who was playing a villain and seeing this Izuku and Inasa looked at each other and then flew at the villains, and Izuku landed with slamming his hammer in the ground, taking out the henchmen in one go, and then looked at Grand Orca and said, everyone, I took care of the villains, you take the main boss. And everyone on the comm said what, why, and Izuku said, I won't always be there for you when you need me, so you have to survive in your own. And with that he flew back up and saw that Todoroki and Inasa were there to fight him. And Todoroki realizing he was a whale shot fire at him while Inasa fired whirlpools at him and the attacks deflected and Todoroki shouted, our attacks will repel each other, so why don't you mix my fire and your whirlpool, form the start and create a fire vortex. Inasa hearing this fired a whirlpool at Todoroki who added fire to it and Inasa moved the whirlpool around and hit Gang Orca who was just standing there to see how much strength the kids had, but after a minute he ran at Inasa and grabbed him by the collar and knocked him out and Todoroki, seeing this tried to freeze him, but Gang Orca blasted his sonic waves at Todoroki, knocking him out as well, and just then Momo came to the place and punched Gang Orca in the arm sending him flying, and as he stood up she ran at him and tried to punch him in the face repeatedly, but Gang Orca kept on dodging. And Momo getting tired of this made a gun and tried shooting Gang Orca in the knee, but Gang Orca grabbed the gun and bended it. Seeing the opportunity Momo grabbed his arms and flipped over and slammed Gang Orca in the ground, and when he was about to do something, Momo placed a lightsaber against his throat and said, do you surrender, and Gang Orca admitted defeat just as Bakugo arrived and he said, damn it, I couldn't do the only thing I am good at. And then the announcer said the exam is over, please go and change into your normal clothings, the result will be announced soon. And after they all had changed the results were out and distributed and everyone saw one thing, they all passed, no one failed and no one got points reduced. The entire class 1A and Venom were cheering and Izuku said, welcome to the world of heroes Venom at least officially, you were already a hero before, and Yoshi just said thanks Izuku, and just then, Mina and Kaminari yell, let's party at Izuku's house. Izuku looked at how happy his friends were and said yay. Now we go back into the part about 1 million years ago and we see young Thor on his Pegasus on Earth, and while going to war with an human army because the people who worshipped him asked for his help, he was just waiting for the god of the other Emry to arrive. At this point he wasn't worthy and only wielded an axe. And suddenly he heard a loud thud, he ordered his Pegasus to go forward, he saw God. More so the god who was supposed to help the army in front of him. And even more surprisingly he only saw his severed head. Part 21. Thor saw the head and then looked up seeing the god's horse and said, no one shall fight today, Give the Sodders time to mourn their god. I will find out who killed him." Then he used his Pegasus to fly up and reach the clouds. While in the cloud he looked around for a while until he found the god's horse, so he flew over to it and took hold of it. Just then out of the corner of his eye, he saw a black sword coming and ducked backwards, and the sword went over him, and when he turned around the man was gone, and Thor shouted, "Who's there? Show yourself," and suddenly he felt something coming from under him and looked down seeing someone coming, and before he could react the person grabbed Thor by the throat and flew upwards, and his axe fell down, and the Pegasus also flew down, while Thor looked at the man and asked, "Who are choking you?" And the man replied, "I am Gore the God Butcher, and who are you?" And Thor said, "I am Thor Odinson." And Gore just looked at Thor and said, "Ah, so you're the Prince of Asgard." And Thor was now just checking about to pass out, and Gore laughed and said, "I have killed many gods, and I knew what they were gods. Some were the god of time who could control time, but there were still beings stronger than them. See, you are just able to live long and control certain aspects of the universe, so you make the lesser races think of you as gods, but in truth you are just like them given you have a few handy ability. Now tell me, what are you the god of?" And Thor, while choking, tried to say something but couldn't, and Gore tightened his grip, saying, "What are you the god of?" And this time Thor weakly said thunder, as lightning struck them both and Thor fell down onto the ground passing out. Thor woke up in a bed and gasped for air as he looked around and found that the Sodders had carried him back to their nation and he was being treated. He then stood up and walked outside and went to an open field and kneeled and prayed to his father and asked, "Father, who was that man?" And Odin from Asgard said, "He is a man named Gore who hates and hunts down gods to butcher them. Stay away from him and come back to Asgard." And Thor replied saying, "No father, if that man is killing gods I have to stop him." And Odin yelled at Thor saying, "Don't go." And Thor said, "Don't worry father, I can easily win," and walked away to his axe and took it and ran out in the world to find Thor and end him. After searching for Gore, Thor one day reached a cave which had blood marks near it, and Thor decided to go and check it out. While going in, Thor was attacked by multiple monsters and he fought and slayed them, but as he slayed the last beast and looked at the entrance of the cave he said, "Well, it was just these beasts, huh?" But suddenly someone whispered into his ear saying, "No Odinson, you're wrong," and pulled him into the shadows. Time skip untold period of time. Thor woke up while he was being hanged by his hands and his entire body covered in wounds, and Gore just yelling, "It's been 21 days, and yet you won't say anything. Every other god is given up in just 2 days. Just tell me what I want, Thor, and I will spare you and your home. Tell me, how do I get into Asgard?" And Thor just laughed with his blooded teeth and mouth saying, "Do you think I am stupid for? Why would I tell someone who kills God and even has a title for that on how to get into a place inhabited by gods? Just because I am a warrior you take me for a fool, don't you?" And Gore said, "Well, I guess I will have to break you even more." And Thor said, "When I get out of here I will cleave you into two." And Gore said, "The only way you get out of here is as a corpse." And just then Thor said, "Well, my men will help me." And Gore was about to say, "No one will help a god who couldn't save himself." And just then a sword was swung at Gore, but he dodged and looked to see a few men who had came to rescue Thor and said, My, there is a first time for everything, I guess." And he attacked the men and was killing them until someone freed Thor, who took his axe and chopped off Butcher's arm and said, "I told you." And as Gore turned around, Thor swung his axe from below and cut Gore into two. And after they set the cave on fire by pouring oil everywhere, and then all the men left the place. A week after, Thor was just sitting in the field, but suddenly he was attacked by some dogs and he tried to fight them, but he was defeated, and then Gore came and said, "Ah, Thor, did you miss me?" And he then dragged Thor through a portal while Thor was captured. The present. Izuku was now sitting in class and was preparing his stuff for the final exams, which were to be held right now. There were no written exam because, as always said, these students will not have to do paperwork, they will only have fight or save someone. No one villain would ask them what's the powerhouse of the cell or something like that. So now the students were getting ready to give their final exams, where they had to fight the teachers, and the pairings were as such as Awa versus Momo and Shoto, and All Might versus Bakugo and Izuku. Now the matches were starting, and Izuku wasn't allowed to use any of his powers except Ofa. And Izuku and Bakugo were walking in a fake city, and Bakugo said, "What's our plan?" And Izuku replied, "I say Aaron, you run away." And Bakugo was about to say no, but All Might sent out a shockwave that destroyed the entire road and building, and after the shockwave passed, Bakugo closed his mouth and said, "As you say," and was about to run away, but All Might wrapped Black Whip around Bakugo's head and slammed him into the ground, knocking him out. And looked to the side to see Izuku, who jumped at him and kneed his father in the face. As All Might was thrown back a bit, he grabbed Izuku's leg and slammed his around like the Hulk, and then flipped him in the air and grabbed his head and ran on the road while rubbing Izuku's face in the ground, and then threw him into a building, and Izuku quickly ran out and jumped at All Might and tried to kick him, But All Might grabbed his leg and every single person in the watch room just said one thing, oh, and Izuku fell down. Now he was angry, and as All Might was going to grab Izuku, he grabbed All Might's hand and kicked him in the face with 100% Ofa and sent him flying, and as All Might flew away, Izuku grabbed him with Black Whip and pulled him down saying, well, you're already father of two, so you won't need that anymore, and punched All Might in the balls, knocking him out. And won the match. Now it was time for Momo's match, and let me just skip it, I don't want to write action today, so the both of them won easily as Momo made a quirk to cancel Izawa's quirk. So now all the kids were in the room and Izawa said, 4 of you failed, the rest passed, good job. Now in 3 days we will go to a summer camp, so pack your shit. Well, Izuku heard something in the back of his head and said, I will be back in a few hours, daddy said as he flew away. On a distant planet a kid was praying, oh, any god out there, please help us, our planet hasn't had days for a few years now and we are about to die, please help us, and just then it started raining and the kid looked up to see Izuku, who flew down and said, well, looks like the rain isn't the only thing you needed, as he made crops in the planet and brought back tree and everything, and the kid ran up to him and asked, which god are you, and Izuku said, call me Thor, and everyone there said, all hail Thor, as they kneeled in front of him, and Izuku just said, please don't do that, there is no need, and then the people had Izuku sit down with them and asked, so why did you pray to other gods and not to your own, and an elder said, they haven't been seen in years, and Izuku stood up and said, your planet will flourish as long as I live, it will work normally, and if you will allow me to leave, I have to find out what happened to your gods. And the old man said, yes, please, and once again thank you Thor, we will never forget what you did for us. But that Izuku flew to the orbit of the planet and found a castle there, and he walked up to the gate and saw that it was chained and decided to break the door and enter. And when he entered he saw dead bodies of the gods and saw that they weren't just dead, they were butchered. Part 22. Izuku looked around in the room and saw all the gods brutally murdered. And while he was looking around he felt a presence behind him and he turned around finding a dog jumping at him, so Izuku in retaliation swung his hammer back, hitting the dog and sent him away. Then he looked around and found there were even more black dogs, and Izuku decided the best bet would be for him to leave this place, so he flew away and into space. He looked at the dogs in the palace and decided he needs to stop Gore right now, and to do that he would need to find information about him. So Izuku went to the Omnipotent City. Upon arriving there Izuku met with Lord Librarian and said, sir, I am sorry to bother you right now, but I need your help, and Lord Librarian replied saying, no need to apologize Izuku, I knew you would come here, so I have already prepared what you need, this is all the information about Gore and the time portal here. As Izuku went over to the table and looked at it, seeing that there were thousands of books, so he pulled out his phone and said, let me just tell me friends and family that I will be gone for a few days. As Lord Librarian just nodded and left, while Izuku dialed the number to his father, and when the call was answered he said, hey dad, where are you right now? And All Might said, well, I was explaining the kids about the summer camp, where are you though? And Izuku said, well, I ran into Gore's dogs, so I am now in Omnipotent City, and I am learning more about him, so I will be gone for a few days, you guys head to the camp without me, okay? All Might hearing this said okay, and the phone was hung up by Izuku. All Might then looked at the students and said, he will not come with us to the camp, so pack your stuff, we are leaving. Let's time skip the training camp because we all know Bakugo got coughed, why, because plot. Izuku now got up from studying non-stop for 4 days, as he stood up he stretched and said that was tiring, and then he remembered that his phone was dead for 2 days, so he charged it and saw that he had many texts from his friends and family. And as he read the texts he came across one from his father saying, come quickly, Bakugo has been abducted by All for One and Gore. Izuku, seeing this text, quickly grabbed his hammer and flew back to Earth at insane speeds, and when he arrived in Japan, he went straight to his father's agency, and upon entering saw his father and many other heroes getting ready to leave for what looked like a mission, and Izuku said, may I join in? And All Might said yes. Now let's go, I'll explain on the way. As all of them left the building, Izuku thought, why do I have to face him just after the serpent, as the mission to save Bakugo from the villains began. Part 23. Izuku looked at everyone and said, so what you mean is that Bakugo was captured by Afo and Gore to bring us out? As All Might and Izawa both said, well, pretty much, yay. So you will take Gore, I presume? As Izuku said, off course, as the team got into a plane which will drop all of them at the location. The surrounding area had been cleared of people. While the plane was above the area, All Might looked at everyone and said, be careful. Just then the back door of the plane opened and a green light shined as everyone jumped out of the plane, as Izuku went straight down to the ground. As everyone landed down they looked in front of them to see an entire army of Numu, Thor and All for One, along with a captured Bakugo, as Afo yelled saying, so you came now, then we don't need this kid, as he freed Bakugo and said, go to your friend, run along. As All Might yelled, Bakugo, quickly come here, as Bakugo stood up and ran to the heroes, and then the hero was told by All Might to escort Bakugo out of there. Izuku yelled out to Gore saying, "Why don't you and I fight somewhere else?" As Gore laughed saying, "Excellent idea and I know just the place so follow me." As he started flying up, Izuku looking at his father, waiting to get a green flag. His father looked at him and nodded saying, "Be careful and come back, okay?" As Izuku responded saying, "I will," and flew after Gore. Meanwhile the world was watching the news and their eyes were on All Might and Afo. All Might looked at everyone and said, "Can you all handle the Nomus? I will take All for One." As Endeavor interrupted saying, "I will also help with All for One, beside he can't be that big of a deal." Hearing this, All Might said, "Let me attack him first, and if you think you can take him then join me." As All Might leapt at All for One and tried to punch him with both arms, but All for One grabbed him and slammed him in a nearby building, and when All Might jumped back at him, he just swatted All Might away as he said, "Don't worry All Might, I will go easy on you later, so I can have some fun, but right now I need to show them not to interrupt us." As he grabbed All Might by his bangs and hit him in the ground repeatedly. And then threw him away. Endeavor seeing this decided to just fight the Nomus because he understood Afo's message and flew straight forwards at the army of Nomus, followed by other heroes. As they reached the Nomu army they all clashed and it was a bloodshed. Some Nomus were killing heroes left right and it was so chaotic that you could not even know what was going on. It was somewhat like this, it was this chaotic. The fight was brutal as it could get because the heroes were fighting mindless killing machines. Endeavor was shooting his fire everywhere he could to try and hit the Nomus because this was not a fight against one, but against many, so he couldn't get the time to finish one off, so he would hit them to knock them down, so someone else could finish them. This is the only thing he could do. Izawa was just holding the Nomus down while others finished them off. This teamwork, but suddenly everyone was thrown off their feet as a massive shockwave was fired in their direction, as only a few heroes were left standing along with many Nomus, while the heroes looked in the direction to see All Might and All for One in a fist clash, as both had hit their fists together and were now in a power struggle. As massive amount of wind was blasted outwards and all the heroes were having trouble standing in this effect, and while some heroes were distracted by the fighting, a few Nomu attacked them, but, luckily, many heroes were able to help and save each other, and were now slowly but surely defeating the Nomus. Meanwhile All Might and All for One had finally broken their power struggle, and All Might went for a punch, but had to jump out of the way as All for One sent his red spikes at him. All Might was slowly being pushed back further and further until he decided to use the 6th user's quirk smokescreen and made a large smoke cloud. This caused All for One's thermal and heat tracing to fail as he could not actually see anything and gave All Might enough time to go around just before All for One blew the smoke away with air cannon. As All Might from behind grabbed One for All with Black Whip, but All for One put his hand in the way, getting it caught in Black Whip, and he pulled All Might closer and grabbed him by the throat, slamming him into the ground. All for One then chuckled and said, "Oh, you're just as bad as your master, you can't do anything." This made All Might angry as he did a push the ground shot himself back, surprising All for One, but All for One moved out of the way of the attack by using airwalk, but much to his surprise All Might flew up as well, and this time with twice the speed, making him faster than All for One could react, and he did him with double the force as he had used the 3rd user's quirk to amplify his power, and this put him miles ahead of All for One. Now All for One was on the back foot due to All Might getting such as power boost so suddenly, and All Might using all the quirks at once like danger sense to avoid attacks, Black Whip, Yo pull All for One or throw objects, float to fly, and smokescreen to blind All for One, and finally using Fajin to amplify the stockpiling aspect as he cornered All for One. As soon as this began All for One was on the tight spot, but his anger was growing, and as he grew more and more visibly frustrated, he had out a giant explosion similar to the one which killed Nana. This knocked everyone who was not strong enough out. As he looked at the remaining heroes and said, "Alright, I've had enough, I will now kill you." But before he could deliver that threat he fell down from the air as he tried to stop himself. He realized his quirks weren't working, and when he looked back he saw Izawa looking at him, saying "Got you," as he then saw Endeavor flying at All for One boosted by Hawk's wings, and he then heard All Might say "Don't forget me," as they both came at All for One at full speed and punched All for One's face from both sides, crushing it like a bug, and then All Might falling down due to exhaustion. He said, "Endeavor, burn it," as Endeavor grabbed All for One's body and flew up, and when he reached a safe distance he yelled saying, "This is how you roast a potato, kids," as let all his fire out and turned All for One to ashes and himself fell down. And all the heroes there finally collapsed from exhaustion. Meanwhile, Izuku flying after Gore in an entire different solar system finally reached their location, a old temple of sword. As soon as they landed Gore walked in and as Izuku was following him, and when they reached the inside Izuku saw a pool with many guard dogs around it as Gore said, "Follow me Izuku, and don't stay here for long." As he walked down into a small pool as red light came out of it and Izuku waited for about 10 seconds and then just walked after him without fighting or saying anything, entered the pool himself, and the next thing he saw was he fell in a horde of guard dogs and started fighting until he heard a grumpy and heavy voice say, "Come at me, you dogs, the king of Asgard still stands." As he looked at the source of the voice to see this, Heart 24. We arrived to see old man sitting on a rock throne with his left hand gone from the bicep down, replaced by a metal arm and a metal patch on his left eye, along with Mjolnir near his feet. And the Odin sword in his right arm. The old man says to himself, today is the day I will die, as he stands up and puts his helmet on. Then he threw his hammer towards the gate, blasting it open as he ran out and jumped in the air. From the air he looked down to see thousands of human dog hybrids, ready to feast on him as he landed on the ruined city of Asgard, slashing many of the monsters, and then called back his hammer and started dual wielding them as he used the hammer to fly around and the sword to chop up the enemies. He kept this up for many hours, and then he got serious as he started to shoot out lightning and killing even more of the monsters. He was dominating them all, but seeing more and more arrive he gave up. He was tired of doing this daily and let the monsters beat him up and eat parts of his body. Just then he was thrown near the gate, where he stood up, held his hammer in one arm and his sword in another as he yelled at the monsters, and as they were approaching him, a hammer fell out of the sky hitting the ground, killing many of the monsters in one hit. As the old man looked up to see Izuku, who had thrown the hammer down and was ready to fight with the old man, as he said, "Don't worry, old man. Whoever you are, I am here to help." As the old man just grunted and said, "Kid, I don't know if you know this or not, but there isn't usually this much talking, so shut up and fight." As he flew towards the crowd of monsters, and the two of them started killing people left and right. Then the two of them got back to back, and the old man said, "Gather them all towards the edge of the city." As Izuku complied and gathered all the monsters at the edge of the as the old man was holding the hammer upright with both hands, and the side of the hammer was facing the monsters, and then, the hammer started to glow as the old man yelled out, "God blast," as he fired energy beam from the hammer, which vaporized everything in the way, even planets and stars. As Izuku just looked at the destruction and the scale of power. As he just looked in fear and awe. He then turned to face the old man and asked, "Who are you?" As the man said, "My name is Izuku Midoriya, I am your future self, now follow me, we should talk." As he walked inside the broken down castle and Izuku followed after him, saying, "What you're telling me? I lose a hand and I, oh my god." The old Izuku just looked at Izuku and just rolled his eyes, saying, "Don't worry, your future may be different. By the way, let me guess, you followed Gore here. Well, you're 900 years late. He came and took away all the Asgardian and killed many of them. He left me here to watch it all end, as he left his dogs to keep me here. Trust me, Izuku, I tried to fight that endless wave of enemies, but after a time I lost hope and was just looking for a way to die." Izuku then looked over to his future self and asked what happened to Momo and the others, and Old King responded, saying, "They are all on Earth. You see, they were allowed to live forever. They are safely trying to revive the planet." As Izuku questioned, "What do you mean?" as Old King, while sitting down on his throne and motioning Izuku to sit on a seat nearby, said, "The Earth lost all the properties of sustaining a life due to the countless mining and technological tests." As Izuku could only respond with "Oh," and the Old King then said, "So now that you're here, should we try and make a plan to attack Gore?" As Izuku smirked and said, "Let's go." Meanwhile, on present-day Earth, Bakugo arrived back to the dorms with All Might, and as soon as he opened the door he saw everyone waiting for him, and while everyone smiled at him, a certain someone jumped at him and said, "You idiot, do you have any idea about how worried I was?" As the blonde saw a brunette floating towards him, as he said, "I am sorry, you're Raka," as she reached him and kissed him. This surprised everyone as they all just looked at this happening. After a while, when they parted, All Might said, "Well, I will take my leave now," as Momo asked, "Wait, where is Izuku?" as All Might said, "He is in the future to face Gore the God Butcher." As Momo shouted, pointing at All Might, saying, "How, what do you mean in the future? Is this some joke? Because if it is, I am not in the mood." Toshinori Yagi, as All Might just had sweat flowing down his face as he responded, saying, "Well, he has to fight Gore in the future, so he went there, so like, don't worry, he will win." As Momo yelled and said, "He died last time against a snake. What do you think he can achieve against someone who is literally called the God Butcher?" All Might then just sighed and made an annoyed face as he was losing his temper and yelled, "In your room, all of you, I don't want to hear a single thing from anyone," as everyone did as they were told, not wanting to piss off All Might any more than he already was. Now back to the future. On a random planet, Thor was being forced to carry black rocks to a dome which was being made for Gore, and Thor wasn't here alone. No, there were multiple gods working, and after a day's work, he was sent to the cave where every other god was also present, and while he was in there he was pacing around, and this made some gods ask, "Who are you, young man? We don't believe we have met," as Thor looked at them and said, "I am Thor Odinson." As everyone in there were shocked to hear his name, and Thor asked, "Yeah, I know you're shocked, but don't worry, now that I am here my father will also come here, and we will all be saved." And as he was smiling, a girl from the shadows said, "He's dead, Odin died 2 million years ago." And Thor looked at her and said, "What, I just saw him a few weeks back." And the girl said, "You're not in that same time, you are 3 million years into the future. Thor Odinson, you also died 2 million years ago, and before you died you gave your power to a human." And Thor spoke up saying, "What, I gave my powers to a human?" Who, as the girl walked out and revealed herself to be a carbon copy of Momo, said, "To my grandfather Izuku Midoriya. The current All-Father trapped on Asgard, not able to do anything." Then Thor said, if even the All-Father can't do anything, what can we do, and what is that thing, as he pointed at the dome. Izuku's granddaughter said, that is the god bomb, a bomb capable of killing all gods throughout time. As Thor lost the glow on his face and said, so there is nothing we can do. Just then two other girls who looked like Izuku and Momo combined said, we have a bomb that can damage the bomb and might possibly destroy it, but the problem is no one can reach the place. You see, we gods are not as strong as our previous generation, but instead we need artifacts to use our powers. Just then Thor started laughing, saying, you can't use your powers, but I can, as he went to a crystal overflowing with energy and lifted it up and closed his eyes and looked up as everyone heard thunder rumbling outside, and it began to rain then. And there Thor started running towards the bomb. He fought everyone who came in his way, hitting them with lightning-induced punches going at speeds faster than light, ripping apart the atmosphere, destroying continent-sized land masses just by moving, and when he reached the bomb he jumped at it and hit it with the crystal, and also charged it with lightning, creating a blast that broke apart the entire planet, and Thor was sent out into outer space. The gods floating on a giant platform saw the bomb to still be in one piece as they cursed under their breath, and also saw the planet to fix itself back. As Gore came out and said, so you finally decided to rebel, how well, then get ready to work even harder. As Izuku's granddaughter said, why don't kill us, as Gore said, good idea, but you being alive and dead is the same thing, you're not capable on anything. He finished saying this as he went away. Meanwhile in space, Thor opens his eyes to find himself on some sort of ship, and as he looks around he sees two men, one really old like his father with a metal arm and eye patch, and the other a young man with green hair resembling the girl he had met in the cave. And while standing up Thor said, let me guess, Izuku Midoriya from the past, as he pointed at teen Izuku, and then pointing at Old King, said, Izuku Midoriya of the current timeline, right? As they both nodded and said, so let us ask you one thing, are you ready to fight? And Thor smirked and said, yes I am, but are you? As Old King smiled and said, time to find out, let's go boy, as the other two just nodded with a look of determination in their eyes. Part 25. Izuku and Old King were looking at the planet down below from their boat ready for attack, and then Izuku said, so how do we proceed? As Old King turned towards him and said, let's go get our gear, then we will make some plans. As both of them headed down into the lower deck of the ship to see young Thor looking at Mjolnir as he said, today I will lift you for sure, but just as he was about to put his hand near it, Izuku came and said, sorry, this one is already taken, now get ready, we are going for a fight. As he walked over and took an armor, put it on, it was the same one he wore while fighting the serpent. Meanwhile Old King was in his armor with the Odin sword and hid hammer in hand, and the young Thor just took a random piece of clothing and his axe. As the three of them then walked over to the top and Old King said ready, as the other two nodded and Old King aimed his sword forward, making the ship boost towards the planet with rumbling thunder. Meanwhile Gore on the planet looked up to see a thundering ship coming down as he said, so the fabled king arrives, as young Thor just jumps down along with Old King and Izuku. All of them attacked their main target, which was Gore, and seeing this all the other gods lifted their weapons and attacked his army. Old King flew straight towards Gore as he hit him in the stomach and smashing him into the ground. And as soon as Gore stood up, for a split second he saw with hammer hitting him in the face as he was once again slammed in the ground, this time face first, and this caused his legs to lift up, which allowed Thor to bring his axe down in Gore's crotch, ripping his crotch and ass apart. This made Gore angry as he quickly released a large amount of energy, pushing them all away as he quickly pulled out black tentacles from the ground and grabbed Izuku, then pulling him down into the ground as he then quickly rushed towards Thor and punched him in the gut, sending him flying away as he then turned towards Old King, but much to his surprise, he was grabbed by the neck and taken to space, where he was punched in the face with a metal arm with so much strength that he was knocked through multiple planets and ended up near a star, and just when he stopped he was hit with a beam by Old King to the chest, which blasted him through the star and sent him millions of light year away, and the blast was strong enough to rip apart the star. Meanwhile Thor landed in the battlefield, and as soon as he tried standing up he was about to be stabbed in the back by a soldier, but Izuku's granddaughter saved him by placing a weapon in between him and the sword. And said, you okay golden locks, as Thor stood up and punched the Solider away and turned towards her and threw her axe towards her, which went from her side to hit a Solider, and said thank you Raven Beauty, as he then called his axe back and went to fight more monsters. Meanwhile Izuku was trapped in the ground as he tried to escape but failed as he then heard a kid say, you can't escape, my father made these things to trap you, you will now rot in here forever. As Izuku said, I see, so if I will die here, then tell me one thing, why does your father hates the gods? As the kid said he doesn't hate them, he despises them, as Izuku made a confused expression and said, I am pretty sure they mean the exact same thing. This made the kid angry as he slapped Izuku and said, shut up, what do you know about my father? Do you know why he hated the gods? As Izuku shook his head as the kid said, my father and his race was abandoned by their gods and left to wander to barren planet. for years and they had to kill their own people and eat them for food. They had to live like that, and when one day he was the only one left alive he was still walking, and he saw something fall out of the sky in front of him. As he looked at it to find a dead celestial, and a man like being dead in front of him and near him, was a black sword which he lifted, and it bonded with him as that day he read the power to kill a god and swore revenge on all the gods. Izuku, while struggling, asked why all of the gods and not only the ones responsible for his pain. As the kid looked Izuku in the eye and said, "What were they all doing when those gods abandoned my father, huh? What were they doing?" As Izuku was now left in silence and the kid walked away, when he reached the ground level he saw his father fighting with Old King, and he saw him slam the Old King near his army to occupy him, as he himself landed and walked to his wife, and the kid walked closer to them just enough to hear what they were saying, as he heard his mother say, "You did great, honey, now we can get rid of those gods and I can stay with you, my love for Ki, you will be my god forever," as she hugged him. This made Gore angry as he broke the hug and said, "What did you call me?" As before his wife could do anything he grabbed her by the neck, and while lifting her he said, "I am no god, and you should have known," as he crushed her neck, killing her. This scared the kid. As he ran back to Izuku and while he came to him he said, "Please stop my father," as Izuku looked up and without being able to say anything he was freed and sent back to the surface, and while being lifted Izuku looked in the kid's eye and saw that he was angry and in pain, so he quickly looked into his mind and saw what just happened, and in retaliation to this, when he reached Gi's surface he flew towards the bomb, and with lightning striking the entire planet, Gore looked at him and yelled, "Come on Izuku, let's dance," as he flew up and got in Izuku's way, but Izuku just yelled out and slammed Gore through the shell of the god bomb, then landing inside in what looked like a pool of blood. As he looked around to see dead bodies of gods there filling up the entire R, and in the center was a giant pillar with a black orb on it. As Izuku decided to throw his hammer at it to destroy it, but before he could he heard Gore yell saying "Nuo" as he without care threw the hammer, and then turned around to see Gore reaching for his throat with his right arm, which had a black sword coming out of it. But before the sword could reach Izuku, Thor came through the roof as he slashed Gore's arm off and then kicked it away as tried to attack them with his left arm, but was grabbed by his tentacles and pulled back by Old King as he said here, as he tossed Izuku the hammer and said, "Destroy it," as Izuku flew up and stood on the pillar and smashed the hammer into the orb, which caused a gigantic shockwave which upon clearing showed that it was still intact. As Gore laughed and said, "It won't work like that, kid, you can do nothing," as he then said, "And now I only need the heart of one more god, and it is here." As he looked at the crack in the wall followed by everyone else as they all saw his separate arm coming from the sky with a heart in its hand, as everyone saw it touch the blood, as everyone could do nothing but watch it as there was an energy spark and the orb began to glow and shine, and Izuku looking at it remembered the moment he got the hammer, the moment he got the power, the moment he became a hero, and how that moment led him to meet Momo. All of this caused Izuku to extend his other hand and grab the other Mjolnir as well, now with two Mjolnir. He smashed the black orb with all of his might as there was a giant clash with the hammers, struggling to get through a force field which was created with the blast expanding outwards as the ballast was being kept in place by the striking force of the hammers, as he was yelling out in pain due to his arms about to break due to the pressure. As Gore saw this and tried to stop him, but Old King held him back with a chokehold with his metal arm, and he then put his right hand towards Izuku and said, "Here, take it for this one moment," as the energy flowed out of his hand and towards Izuku, and when it hit Izuku, it felt the entire universe in a second, as he knew it was the Odin force, as he knew what he needed to do as he put all the power into himself, as all of a sudden a white light covered the entire place as both Izuku and Gore screamed. When the light went away everything was destroyed, and when they looked around they saw Izuku with both hammers standing in the middle with a black symbiotic substance around him, as Gore looked at him asking, "What did you do?" And Izuku responded saying, "I absorbed it, I absorbed the god bomb." Part 26. Gore looking at Izuku said, "No, it should not be possible, you should be dead." And Izuku just responded saying, "Oh, I will die, but now before you." As Gore tried to attack him but was hit in the right side of the stomach by Thor with his axe as he flew out of the chamber. And all three thunder gods followed after him as he landed in on the ground and started crawling away due to all the pain. As he crawled forward he saw 2 feet standing in front of his, as he looked up to see his son standing there looking down at his father. As Gore pleaded saying, "Help me son, trap them until my wounds heal," but what he got was a cold stare from his son as he stabbed him in the heart and lifted him up and saying, "Why should I help the person who killed my mother?" As Gore realized that he saw him kill his mother, so he said, "Fine, then you may join her in death," as he brought a sword out of his left hand and tried stabbing his son. But luckily Thor came there and pulled the kid out of the way as Old King rushed and punched Gore in the face, sending him flying backwards towards Izuku, who slammed him down with both his hammers while saying, "Eat this," as there were giant shockwaves as Gore laid there taking his final breath as he just stared at Izuku with angry eyes, and after spitting up a lot of blood he gathered the last of his energy and yelled, "I, Gore the God Butcher, curse you the God of Thunder that this hammer and the power you hold will take everything from you." As Gore finally died and as Izuku and the others looked at the kid walking towards his father's body, Izuku was about to say something until he noticed that the boy's body was falling apart and he said, "Hey kid." Meanwhile the kid just looked at Izuku and smiled saying, "Don't feel sorry for me, I died a long time ago. This was but a mere creation of mud made by my father so he could be with us," as the kid finally crumbled away. Izuku then, feeling the adrenaline wear off, dropped the hammers and fell to his knees yelling out in pain. Meanwhile Old King quickly placed his hand on Izuku and took out all the God Bomb along with the Odin Force, and that was the last thing Izuku saw before passing out. After a few days Izuku woke up in a room as he gasped for air while sitting up and said what the buck happened as he felt a pat on his back from Thor who said, well. Long story short, you absorbed it and killed the God Butcher and then old man here, as he pointed at Old King who was standing beside the bed as Thor continued saying, took the God Bomb out of you and learned that it was a sword belonging to the symbiote King Null who died fighting a celestial and the sword was found by Gore when Null crash landed on his planet. Izuku then looking at Old King asked, so where is it now? And Old King just said in a supermassive black hole. Izuku just looked at him while saying, you sure it will be safe there, as Old King simply nodded and said, you know you were lucky to be able to survive the effects of the God Bomb. Then he sighed and said, who am I kidding, you only survived because the gods from the past also helped me in healing you. As Izuku laid there just looking at the ceiling and said, when do I get to go back home? As Old King said, well, since you look in fine condition you can return home, as he started walking away as both Izuku and Thor followed after him saying, well, how are we going back? When they reached the terrace, Old King opened his palm facing towards the empty space in front of the terrace and a portal opened as he said, did you not know the Odin Force is capable of doing this kind of stuff? As Izuku just shook his head saying, I had no idea. Meanwhile Thor just said, well then goodbye kids, I should go home. The WS are waiting for me. As Izuku asked, what are the WS? Thor just smiled and said, women, wine, war and winds. This caused Old Man to let out a single laugh before calming down and saying, well then both of you will retain the memories as our timelines are different, so I don't have to say anything, just stay safe you two. Izuku only nodded. Meanwhile Thor scoffed saying, you act like my dad. As Old King sincerely smiled and said, well, I was a father myself, so I guess all fathers are alike, after which he embraced the two and then pushed them in the portal, saying, now go you fools. As Thor and Izuku went separate ways in the timeline, Thor landed in the field he was taken from, and Izuku landed in a dark place where he stumbled around to hit his pinky finger on the side of something, making him fall down as he made a loud thud sound as well as a yell of pain. This caused someone in the dark place to wake up who turned on the lights, and Izuku looked at the figure, not being able to see her as she was standing in front of the light, but as the figure approached closer he saw it to be the love of his life, Momo Yaoyorozu. As Momo quickly helped Izuku up and onto his bed, yes, she was waiting for him in his room. As Momo said, do you have any idea of how worried I was? Her puffy red eyes were clear indicators that she cried herself to sleep. Izuku just hugged her and said, don't worry, I am here now, as he laid back down while still hugging her and slept through the night. Part 27. Momo's Pav. I was woken up by the sound of birds singing outside my dorm window as I stretched out my arms to remove the stiffness of staying in the same position the entire night. I felt something missing around me as I patted the bed sheets around myself and then finally opened my eyes when I confirmed that I was all alone. I sat straight up and got out of bed, leaving my room as I was looking for Izuku all over the dorms, and while going out the door, I saw Izuku walking to the dorms while carrying groceries. As I asked him, hey, have you seen Izuku anywhere? As I then, without waiting for an answer, ran past him, and then after taking a few steps it hit me who I was talking to as I slowly turned behind while hearing laughter coming from behind me. End of Pav. Izuku was on the ground laughing his lungs out as he had water in his eyes as he saw Momo with a dumbfounded face, and this made him spat out laughing as he started choking on his laughter at the end. When he saw an angry and almost brought to tears Momo, he stopped laughing and walked up to her and hugged her saying, hey, I am here, it's okay. Momo hugged Izuku while crying. Izuku then took Momo back to the dorm and they were welcomed by the entire class as Izuku looked at everyone and said yo. Just then Bakugo walked up and pulled Izuku away from Momo and threw him onto the couch and asked, so what happened in the future and all? Yeah, I wanna know, Midibroch. I'm Mina. I want to know about the future as well, asked Uraraka. Suddenly Mineta spoke up asking, do I get a lot of ladies in the future? Everyone was like, seriously, bro? And so on. Izuku told everyone about the future and after that they informed Izuku of what happened behind him in the present. Wow, they squashed his face. Damn, that was brutal, spoke up Izuku after hearing about Afo's defeat and death. Just before anyone could answer, All Might walked in and said, yes it was, my boy, I still have the smell of his blood in my fist, but that's not important. I wanted to tell you all that we are leaving for Island in 3 hours, pack your stuff. He then took a small pause and said, Izuku my boy, come with me. Izuku followed out of the room and walked with All Might. As he reached him, he saw tears in All Might's eyes as he said, Dad, everything okay? Why are you crying? All Might then without turning around said, "It's about Melissa, she is dying." "What?" yelled out Izuku. Part 28. "What?" yelled out Izuku. "Yes, she is dying, my boy," responded All Might. Izuku wanted to ask what had happened but decided to stop thinking about her death and ask his father, "Where is she right now?" All Might just buffed up and told Izuku to try to keep up as he jumped towards the main UA building with Izuku, who activated OFA and dashed right behind All Might, even managing to surpass him and reach the main UA building and used his super hearing to locate Melissa and ran up to the location. Only for him to find his friend laying on the hospital bed. Izuku broke seeing her like this, her once golden hair now completely gone, not a single strand of hair on her head. He then looked at her face, she was just smiling at him, so Izuku returned the gesture as he walked towards her and asked, how die this ha. Pen. Stuttering to speak after a really long time. "Remember the vibranium and how it was highly radioactive? Well, you see, turns out my radioactive suit has a leak in it and I was exposed to the high level of radiation enough to give me cancer," she said as tears started to leak through her sky blue eyes. She just looked away, quickly hiding her tears and wiping them off with her hands. But due to suddenly feeling some arms around her body and someone whispering into her ears. That someone being Izuku, who whispered, "Don't worry, I am here with you now and always, I won't let anything happen to you, you have been strong long enough, I am here now, let it go." Melissa then burst out crying, hugging Izuku tightly, saying, "I don't want to die." Then after a few sobs, she gathered the courage and said those so memorable words to One Piece fans. Izuku then sang a melody in her ear, making her fall asleep. After which he stood up and saw Aizawa, Nezu, All Might and David standing at the door. Much to their surprise, he left without saying anything and he so walked towards the only person who he could go to talk in these moments when he was feeling like his heart was ripped out. That person is the most important person in his life, Inko Midoriya, his mother. To all those that thought it was gonna be Momo, I think you should know nothing is more important than mother. He reached his house and knocked on the door. He heard slow footsteps approach the door as he then saw the door open and his mother behind the door with a swollen belly due to being around 4 months pregnant. "I genuinely forgot when she got pregnant. I do remember her being pregnant but don't remember when and we're so sorry. Izuku, my baby boy." She pulled Izuku in for a hug as she started crying. Izuku just hugged his mom back and smiled seeing her like this. This reminded him of the old days they had spent together, just the mother and son living their life. Izuku then responded to his mother saying, "You can squeeze me later, mom, right now think of the baby," as Inko let go of her son and gestured Izuku to enter the house. As soon as they reach the living room, they both sit opposite to each other as Izuku begins to say, "Mom, I have something I want to talk to you about." "Well, actually two things," worry clearly heard in his voice. Inko then, worried about her son, asked, "What's the matter, Izuku?" Izuku then said, "Mom, it's Melissa, she has cancer and she is dying as we speak." Inko's eyes widened in horror as she said, "No, tell me you're joking." She was broken hearing this because David was a really good friend of her and she knew Izuku and Melissa were very close due to being smart and nerdy. Hearing no answer, she asked again, "Izuku, is this true?" Izuku looked her in the eye with his own eyes now filled with tears as he said, "She is dying and I hate the fact that I can't do anything because to maintain the balance of the universe, the power cosmic can't be used for some time." Inko then just held her son's hand and said sorry. As Izuku then continued and said, "And also the other thing is about Momo." This caused Inko to raise an eyebrow as she was about to ask what about her. But Izuku beat her to it as he said, "I want to break up with Momo," leaving a surprised Inko to yell out saying, "What?" Part 29. In the last chapter, we learned of Melissa's decreasing health and her getting cancer. Then came Izuku's absurd plan to dump Momo and well, his mom's reaction soon followed, being an overly dramatic stretched "What? Now, are you crazy, Izuku, why would you dump her?" asked a frustrated Inko. Izuku bluntly looked at his mom and said, "Just kidding, I was messing with you, of course I won't dump my girlfriend, you know." Izuku then walked towards the door saying, "I guess he'll get going, see ya, mom." He leaves before Inko could do anything. Inko sat at the dining table and called All Might, who picked up the phone after a few rings. "Yes, honey," asked All Might. Inko answered, "You are taking Izuku and his friends to Island, right?" "Yes, I am, why, anything wrong?" Inko just sighed and said, "Keep an eye on Izuku, he is acting weird, I'll handle it, don't worry." Meanwhile, with Izuku, he had arrived at the dorms and found Aizawa sitting outside the dorms. Izuku walked over and sat beside Aizawa, taking in the night sky as both did not dare speak to one another. Both knew that they were the reason why Melissa was dying. Izuku dared to break the silence but was cut off by Aizawa. "Listen, you and your friends are going to Island tomorrow, so go and rest and don't beat yourself over it. It was an accident, it's not your fault." Aizawa was holding his tears in until he was hugged by Izuku as they both broke down crying. "I will stop blaming myself when you do the same. I know both of us think it was our fault, but it was a coincidence, so don't beat yourself over it." As he broke the hug and they wiped their tears and smiled at each other before walking to their respective rooms. The next day the entire class was on the plane, along with All Might in his normal form, which is his form from the Two Heroes movie. Melissa was also on the plane, as well as her dad going to Island to find a cure for his daughter. The plane landed and Izuku walked out with Momo holding his hands as he took deep breaths. He suddenly stopped, causing Momo to stop, as well as she asked him, "What's the matter?" Izuku simply looked at her and said, "I don't know, I can't keep on pretending anymore." "About what?" Momo asked Izuku with his mouth open, breathing heavily like he was about to have a heart attack or a panic attack as he said, "I am losing my mind, help me," as tears came out of his eyes. And the once thought invincible hero fell to his knees screaming as everyone quickly turned around and went to him, then suddenly lightning fell near them as they all were blown away. They all heard laughter as they recovered from the sudden attack. All they could hear was a burst of maniacal laughter as Izuku rose up from a creator, but with his costume a dark tone than usual, and his eyes yellow instead of green. Get ready to meet the Maker. Chapter 30. Alter Izuku stood over all of his classmates as he laughed maniacally as everyone began feeling the pressure, as all of them stayed on the ground terrified until Izuku prepared to throw his hammer at Mina, but Momo noticed and stood in between Izuku and Mina, causing Izuku to freeze for a moment as Momo took advantage of the situation and quickly fired a tranquilizer, taking Izuku down. Bakugo stood up and ran towards Izuku along with All Might. "What just happened, young Yaoi Rozu, what did you do?" "I just shot a few tranquilizers at him, I learned to make from Asgard. There is something wrong with Izuku, we should take him to a lab and run some tests on him." All Might nodded, picking Izuku up as he dashed towards David's lab, followed by the entire class. "I ran some tests on Izuku, mostly on his brain, and it's just what I feared for quite some time." The sudden mood swings. "What do you mean? David is my son, alright?" David advised All Might to sit down as he began explaining. "The brain scans I ran on Izuku were cross-referenced with people who suffer from DID, meaning dissociative identity disorder, where one loses his sense of identity and another identity emerges from within. Mostly it happens due to being pushed down by society or being an outcast or any other type of feeling of inferiority. This causes the mind to create a different version to keep out all the bad things or to release some of the urges hidden inside one's mind." All Might was distraught while looking at his son as he felt a hand on his shoulder. Is there any idea what his other personality be like?" "Yay, a murderous sociopath. He holds all the trauma and anger Izuku kept inside all those years of being bullied as a quirkless." Bakugo, hearing this through the other side of the door, just slid down the wall with his back against it. He then broke down crying. Izuku woke up in the hotel room. He looked at his surroundings as he found Momo coming out of the bathroom. She was drying her hair with a towel, and as soon as she saw Izuku, she dropped the towel and covered her body. Izuku, getting a nosebleed, quickly turned away. "I am so sorry, I did not mean to look at you like that." "It's okay, you can look if you want, we are dating, aren't we?" Izuku, hearing the words, turned around and found an impressive sight in front of his eyes. This was the second time Izuku saw the gates of heaven in front of his eyes. Momo, well blushing, got dressed, and when she turned around she saw Izuku standing in front of her. "Momo, I want to tell you something." "Yes, what is it?" Momo said, tilting her head. "Momo, when I said I can't fake it anymore, what I meant to say was I can't fake wanting to be your boyfriend. I don't want to be your boyfriend, so please break up with me." Momo was distraught. She began to cry while covering her face, and until she heard Izuku say something else, she opened her eyes to find him on his knee in front of her as he pulled out a box and said, "And please marry me instead, I want to be your husband instead of your boyfriend." Momo was too stunned to speak until she felt two warm hands wrap around her shoulders. "It's okay if you don't want to marry me, I will understand, just say something, the silence is killing me." Momo came back to her senses and hugged the green plushie back, crying, "I would love to marry you, Dumbo." But that the two of them locked their lips in a passionate embrace. They then hear the door knock as their classmate said from the other side, "Get ready, we have a party." The two look at one another and smile, saying, "Sure, we'll be there soon enough, wait for us in the lobby." After a couple of minutes, both of them got dressed and arrived in the main lobby on the ground floor. All were looking good, everyone in formal dressing. Then came the couple of the newly engaged teens. Everyone looked at them and were jealous of how good the both of them look. They had it all: money, fame, looks, smarts and power. But before anything could happen, alarms began ringing. Intruder, intruder, intruder. As the doors shut on our heroes. Part 31. What was that? The doors suddenly shut on us, maybe a security error, I think. I mean, this is Island, there won't be any intruders here surely, right? Well, if we had learned anything from past experiences is that nowhere is safe, so be ready. Then Izuku put his hand out calling for his hammer, only for his hand to remain empty. "Well, that's new," remarked his classmates. Suddenly Minoru Mineta popped out of a vent, falling on the floor. "You okay, buddy?" "Yay, I'm good, and I come with information. Apparently they have your hammer placed under some sort of spell keeping it in a position, and they have taken over the party. They are from a terrorist fraction, and they have your mother as a hostage, Izuku. This is preventing everyone else from doing anything. That bastard is long gone when I'm done with him." "How do we get there?" You aren't exactly on your 100% Izuku. Don't worry Momo, I'm more than just a hammer and Thor, I have my father's quirk after all. But that Izuku charged up Ofa and ran towards the doors, sending a smash its way only for it to bounce right back with twice the force. Well, that was surprising. He dusted himself off, then he thought about another way when he grabbed Mineta. Listen, I'm going to launch you to that vent, you go up there and navigate the vents and help guide us through to the levels. Momo, you make a cutting torch melt through the door, everyone be on high alert, we have to end this with stealth and speed if we wish to make it to the party unannounced. You got it. Good, now Mineta keep on informing us about the enemy on the other side. Alright, with that Izuku threw Mineta to the vent who climbed into them using his balls. Everyone get ready, the door then melted open, letting the heroes go through as they began making their way up the tower. Meanwhile, move it, Mr. Shield, it's not exactly easy walking with a bullet in your thigh so that you know, well you were the one trying to be a hero. The villain's leader was taking Mr. Shield to the top floor of the tower, where the high-end gadgets were kept away from the reach of the public and villains alike. They soon came across a giant door which the villain ripped open as he pulled the injured doctor inside and threw him to a console. Now, give me the quirk magnifier. David, hesitant at first, complied, opening the vault housing the said gadget. The villain wasted no time donning it on his head. As he could feel the power surge through him as he tore the room apart and took out all the gadgets in the room and safely put them in crates and left the room, but not before stabbing David in the stomach with a metal spike, not enough to kill him, but to incapacitate him. As he made his way to the rooftop, there was a plane in which he loaded all the gadgets, and just when the plane was about to take off, he heard the door to the rooftop broke apart in a flash of light. He was met with a punch to the gut that sent him into his helicopter, breaking it in half. Wolfram, you are not getting anywhere, shouted Izuku as he stood at the middle of the platform. We'll see about that, hero. Take the loot and leave, he signaled as the plane began to fly away. Izuku, noticing this, tried to hold the plane back with a black whip but was met by a giant pillar crushing him into the floor, resulting in the plane escaping. How the hell did you even manage to get here this quick? I'm impressed. Izuku, getting up from the floor, smiled. Well, it wasn't really a challenge. 5 minutes ago, the door came down and the heroes swarmed in, taking out the henchmen in mere moments. Alright, now where, Mineta? There is an emergency staircase to your left in about 20 meters. Use it to climb up to floor 67, but Midoriya, if you take my advice, you take Melissa and open an emergency hatch at floor 50 and take her up to floor 99 where the control tower is located. Maybe she can deactivate the security and turn it against the villains. Also Boogie's at floors 12, 34, 48. Will do, Mineta, thanks for the intel. You all heard the plan, let's do this. Izuku grabbed Melissa's hand and carried her bridal style before rushing through the stairs, knocking the enemies while protecting Melissa until he made it to the 50th floor and broke the emergency door open and jumped out of the building and began running up it. Part 32. After escaping the stairs, Izuku and Melissa had began running up the side of the tower to reach the 99th floor. They're quick even without your godly abilities, Midoriya. Well, call it good genes, we are nearing the 99th floor, be prepared to meet resistance. Meanwhile, he did not even hesitate for an instant, but I guess he gave us a clear path to the party floor. His classmates agreed with one another. They ran up the stairs. Hey Ida and Momo, why don't you use your powers to get up quicker? We can't, Uraraka, something is stopping us from using our runic and speed force powers. What a bummer. Well, let's just get to the party. When they exited the stairs on the 67th floor, they arrived at an indoor park at the center of which the party was taking place in a glass dome. They all in sync hid behind two large bushes. So here's the plan, we divide into two teams and enter the dome from either side and quickly take out the villains inside, but before that, we need to clear the area of enemies. Mineta, take out the snipers in the vicinity and the rest of us will clear the ground. The team spread apart, attacking some lonely and unsuspected guards. This was starting to feel like the Batman game Izuku used to play and show Momo. Meanwhile, Mineta was jumping in and out of the vents and taking out snipers situated on vantage points. After all, we're taken care of. They surrounded the giant dome and heard an elevator open at the end of the tunnel to see Bakugo, Kirishima and Shoto walking out. Kirishima, being the funny talkative dude he is, was about to run to his classmates until he saw Momo point a 50 cal rifle at him. He hid behind Bakugo, who was also quite scared, but all three of them walked to the group. Listen here, I'll make it quick. Hostage situation inside. Shoto attacks the roof of the dome from the left, Kirishima from the right, and Bakugo flies in quickly and explode the roof into the sky. Then me, Ida, Uraraka, Tsu, and Jiru will drop in from above, while the rest enter from the sides and take out the villains inside. They all nodded and the plan was a go. Shoto and Kirishima broke the roof apart. As soon as they made contact, Bakugo flew in at extreme speeds and blasted the roof, covering the party in smoke as the whole building shook, and in the guise of the dust and smoke, the heroes infiltrated and entered the dome, taking out all enemies that stood before them. The hostages started at the smoke, and once it was clear, they all saw the young heroes standing above the unconscious villains. The student then began to help the hostages to their feet and tried to free them. Suddenly they were freed as the system turned green again, signaling that Melissa had done her job. All Might got up and upon making sure his wife was safe and okay, he stood up and basically flew out of the room at insane speeds. He was possibly pissed off due to his pregnant wife had been put in danger. A few minutes prior, Izuku tore apart the emergency hatch using Black Whip and entered the 99th floor. He then ran towards the control tower, only to find it completely ruined with a bleeding David shield on the floor. Melissa ran to her father and checked to find him still alive. He looked his daughter in the eyes. "Izuku, quick, you need to stop Wolfram. He is planning on stealing all the high-end equipment on the island." He seemed to head to the roof. "I will stop him. Melissa, you deactivate the emergency measures while I go to stop Wolfram." "Got it, Deku." She then took one last look at her father and went to the console. Meanwhile, Izuku ran to the roof and shot the door off. He then found Wolfram in the middle and hit him in the gut at blinding speeds, sending him into his helicopter, and then tried to stop the plane only for Wolfram to smash him into the ground. But Izuku although failed to stop the attack. "How the hell did you even manage to get here this quick? I'm impressed." Izuku stood up, popping a few of his bones. "Well, it was not that hard." Then the building shook again, causing Wolfram to lose focus. Izuku took advantage of this and hit him in the stomach, sending him nearly to the edge, and then jumped high in the air to slam his feet into Wolfram's hands, resulting in him letting go and falling from the tower. As Izuku watched him fall, he sensed danger and jumped back, only to barely dodge a giant spike coming out the floor as Wolfram rose up in some sort of metallic giant. Izuku chuckled to himself as he stretched around looking at the giant. "I'll take you seriously now." Just then booming voice roared from behind the giant as he turned around to be hit in the face by an angry All Might and sent straight to the floor. Izuku just put his arms in his pockets as his father landed beside him. "Father. Son. Everything okay?" "Yay, your mom's fine and healthy, but the same cannot be said for this bastard. But as long as we're in agreement, let's buck him up." All Might once again smiled as he rushed through the heart of the giant to not find its master. Then he turned around and his eyes widened. "Izuku, watch out." Izuku turned around only to feel too slow. He was too slow to dodge what was coming. Wolfram came out of the ground as if he was a part of it and stabbed Izuku in the right side of the chest and then launched himself away using a metal platform. The rest of the students arrived at the roof to find Izuku there impaled and the villain hovering over the ground with All Might rushing over to Izuku. But before he could, the villain sent an arm through the floor in front of him and touched his injury. Then, as if he knew rune magic, he removed the healing spell, keeping All Might healthy and keeping one for all in him. All Might then fell down to the floor as he deflated into his skeletal form. Bakugo used his boosters to rush at the villain, even catching him off guard and sending him off his platform into the air. And kept on pushing on with his attacks. Shoto, Momo, and Ida jumped in to support him, while the rest carried All Might and Izuku away. "My hammer. It's locked in some magical bullshit and it seems to be connected to that." Mineta was pointing at some glowing necklace worn by Wolfram. Izuku cursed under his breath as he had failed to notice it before. "Just trust the rest, they will destroy it and then you can call your hammer and heal yourself," Mineta said, applying pressure to the wound. "Bakugo, the necklace, break it." That's what's stopping Izuku from calling his hammer. "Thanks, Grapehead. You are a dead villain," Bakugo said as he rose high up in the air and winding for an attack. He rushed at the villain at an even faster speed than Izuku, yelling, "Pulitzer impact." Part 33. All Might and Izuku were hurtled up together, being protected by Kirishima, who took care of all the attacks. The group had been trying to help Bakugo land a blow on the necklace, but it wasn't working as Wolfram kept on protecting himself with the use of metal all around him until one moment when Shoto yelled out from behind Ida and Bakugo, "It's ready, get out." Both of them heard him and jumped to the sides as Shoto sent a giant glacier at Wolfram, freezing his entire surrounding and his body as well. Momo then took aim with a giant cannon she had created as she fired what seemed to be a laser beam, which Wolfram managed to dodge by shoving himself with an iron pillar, but lost an arm. As he was falling through the air, he called on another platform for himself to land. He rose up only to be met by a kick to the ribs, sending him down to the platform. Ida then looked back to Momo. Seeing her fallen on the platform, he then looked at Wolfram. Looking at Momo, Bakugo launched at him, but before he could hit him, Wolfram smirked, sending a giant spike Momo's way. Ida noticed this, running to save Momo. He yelled as he reached his arm out to her, but it was too late. The spike was faster than him. It went past him and blocked his vision as he saw blood fly around it. For a moment Bakugo, Shoto, and Ida were frozen until something hit the spike, breaking it, and as it fell down, they saw Izuku had shielded Momo with his body. He coughed up blood as he fell in front of Momo, who could only try to crawl towards him. "Bakugo, break that thing now." Ida then grabbed Momo, taking her away from Izuku, who smiled looking at her. "Go away, you better be ready to meet the maker, villain." Bakugo then placed his hands on Wolfram's chest before doing his biggest explosion to date, sending himself flying up into the air from the force and breaking half of the roof and the necklace, sending Wolfram down the building. But the necklace gone, All Might felt the energy come back as his body was once again fully healed. He stood up trying to jump, but found his quirk not working. He then realized his quirk was gone. On the other hand, Shoto was beside Bakugo helping him up. That was a massive attack. You think he's down, hopefully. They both then heard the sound of metal. Why does the villain always get so many second wins? It's unfair. I agree. Then the giant iron hand rose up, grabbing the side of the building with Bakugo and Shoto between its fingers. The metal giant then rose up with Wolfram laughing from inside. He then tried to squish Bakugo and Shoto with his foot until a flying object went through its knee, breaking the leg off. Wolfram looked forward, seeing Izuku fly at him at super speed, going through the head of the giant, bringing Wolfram out and throwing him up in the air, then flew after him and from up above hit him in the back, sending him to the platform. He fell with a thud, with Bakugo taking the machine that fell from his head. He then felt a bracelet on his hand. It was a quirk-canceling bracelet. Izuku then landed in front of him as the group surrounded him. Gore was right, you really are nothing without your weapon. You Izuku Midoriya would be nothing without that hammer. Nothing, look how I beat you so easily. He laughed as he closed his eyes, falling unconscious. Izuku then looked at him for a few minutes, not speaking a word. Everyone looked over to him before Izuku fell to the floor as he tried to lift his hammer, but struggled to do so. He felt weakness come over him as his Asgardian armor went away, but he still had his altered body. He then tried to lift the hammer again, but it refused even to budge. Everyone saw Izuku struggling as All Might went over to him, placing his hand on his shoulder. It's okay my boy, leave it. Izuku fell on both knees with his hands limp on the ground, with his head hung low. Yay, let's go. They all arrived back at the party where the police and other heroes had arrived. All Might handed Wolfram over to the heroes as David and Melissa came down. He took all the items away, but you guys destroyed the most powerful of them all, so it's still a win for us. Izuku was sitting at a chair feeling low, thinking about what had just happened and how did he lose his hammer so suddenly. He was feeling like he had lost himself. The words kept repeating over and over in his head before Inko came next to him hugging her son. It's okay Izuku, you are more than that hammer did not make you, you made that hammer. You are still a hero, so live up to it by being Izuku Midoriya and not Thor. Izuku smiled as his mom ruffled his hair. Thanks, Mom. Suddenly came the sound of roaring thunder as Izuku ran to the elevator followed by his friends. When they arrived at the roof they found it more damaged than before as it was most likely hit with large amounts of electricity. Izuku, followed by Momo, arrived at the center of the roof to find the hammer missing. Izuku then looked up, seeing a figure fly away wearing his armor. Chapter 34. War of the Realms. Izuku was in his dorm room rethinking about the night that had transpired a week ago. His hammer went missing, but made subtle appearances in the news, taking down multiple villains, but the bearer was still unknown. Meanwhile, Melissa's health had taken a sharp turn for the drastic. Izuku was helping her heal, doing his best, but Melissa had rejected Asgardian magic, saying she wants to die freely, and that is what makes life special, that you die once and not again and again. The world had seemingly returned to normal, if that could be said. There were fewer and fewer villains around the world, no supernatural entities, people going to office and to school. Izuku shot out of his chair, remembering what he had to do today. He hopped in the shower, getting dressed in his school clothing, and he was off walking through the corridor. He was met with Momo standing outside the room. Why did you not go in yet? I was waiting for you. She then held out her hand to him. Let's go in together. Yay. They opened the door as two pieces of chalk hit them in the head at the same time, as Aizawa had thrown two files at their faces as well. You're both late. Detention complete this work for me. Izuku grabbed a file, looking inside. He then bowed to his teacher, apologizing as he grabbed Momo's hand and dragged her away. What is it, Izuku? Aizawa-sensei has given us a secret mission. We have to rescue a girl from a cartel selling quirk-related drugs. Momo chuckled. Well, Aizawa-sensei just knows what his students need to feel better. Yay, that he does. Get ready. I am already in my hero outfit, but what would you wear? Asgardian clothing, a shirt, some pants and a cape. As he changed his clothes with magic, Momo whistled. Izuku and Momo were currently walking through the sewers when Momo's tracker gave them the heads up. Izuku looked up, seeing a manhole. He jumped up using Ofa and then began to float as he used Black Whip to slowly lift the manhole in Momo. As they got out of the place, they found themselves in a storage room. As they exited, they realized they were not messing with a low-time organization by the looks of it. This was a seriously well-funded facility. They began walking through the corridor as Momo guided them using her tracker. Izuku got curious. How are you tracking the girl? I got some of her blood work and am tracking the radiation emitted by her DNA. I see, I picked the right girl. Izuku then turned the corner that led to the girl's room as he spotted two guards and used Ofa to speed blitz them, both knocking them out. Momo, get the girl and leave immediately. Why? My danger sense is tingling. We must have set off some sort of alarms and someone strong is coming to get the girl and leave. Suddenly Izuku pushed Momo to the side as a stone spike went by, embedding itself in the door and opening it. Izuku turned around, facing the man dressed in black with a bird mask. Overhaul. Izuku Midoriya, you've come to die. Well, been there done that, but nah, I am here to save the girl. Just then Momo got out of the room with a scared Eri in her hands who was hiding her face from Overhaul. Eri, you don't want these good people to die, do you? Shut up, the voice surprised Overhaul as it came from Eri, who looked at the man still in tears. I believe they will save me. Overhaul gets angry as he looks at the ground. Well, I think I will have to break her again, so thank you so much. He got ready to touch the wall but was punched in the gut, breaking the already existing spikes and sending Overhaul into the wall at the end of the corridor. She said shut up. So shut up. Momo, take her and leave. Momo nodded and ran away with Eri in her hands. Well, now time to deal with you, Overhaul. Izuku was about to kick Overhaul in the face when a giant blue hand came through the wall and pulled him through into a large opening with a water channel flowing in the middle. Izuku was then thrown to the other side of the room. He landed on the ground looking ahead. He saw frost giants, how convenient. Izuku then summoned the axe from his hand straps. I get to slay giants today. He then rushed at them, easily outclassing them with Ofa, his Asgardian genes and hand-to-hand talent, until Overhaul joined in, gracing Izuku's stomach from the side with one of his biggest spikes. Izuku was then forced to slow down and think about his movements due to the pain and blood loss. Izuku then gritted his teeth, screw it. He then went 70% Ofa and started flying off the walls like a pinball, defeating the giants left and right until one of them opened a small casket, releasing ice, cooling the environment and covering the floor in snow. Casket of Ancient Winters. This could be bad. Izuku then threw his axe at the box attempting to destroy it, but the axe was caught mid-air. This caught Izuku off guard as stone blocks came from the side, squishing him and making him dizzy as he was falling from the air. A frost giant grabbed both of his hands, holding him in the air like Jesus, as a man revealed himself to have stopped the axe as he undid his invisibility. His face was divided into two colors, one off-white and the other black, same with his hair and two long pointy ears. Malekith, king of the Dark Elves, so you are the mastermind. Who else it could be, and what better time? Asgard has just returned. I get to skirmish at Odin along with it, and you, the champion of Asgard, are not worthy of your hammer. Overhaul laughed as he stood beside Malekith. I get to experiment with him, now give him to me, we had a deal. No, he needs to deliver the MSG to Odin and also tell him his worst mistake is on its way. I will wait until he has dealt with it. Don't want to kill Odin while he faces his biggest fear, let him heal, then we shall begin with the War of the Realms. But Malekith, we had a deal, I get to experiment on him, you will get your chance again, meanwhile I got something else for you. He then hands him a vial containing black goo. Izuku screamed, where did you get that? From your friend Venom, who else? Don't worry, I left him alive, he must already be in UA with Recovery Girl. Now if you are so worried about him, why not send you to him? He then threw the axe, cutting Izuku's right arm off from the middle of the bicep. Izuku screamed in pain, and the frost giant let go of him, letting him fall on the floor beside his axe. Malekith then came and took his arm with him as he vanished along with all of his accomplices. Several minutes later, several heroes came through the walls and doors, only to find Izuku laying unconscious in the middle of the room covered in the snow, his wound cauterized by the ice. Part 35. Izuku was currently laying in a bed in Recovery Girl's room. His classmates and friends were waiting outside. In the middle sat the Allfather directly beside Dad Might. Is he awake yet? No sir Odin, he is still unconscious. I got to ask, why are you even here, Odin? All Might, I am not pleased to be here just as much as you are not pleased to have me here, but there is something off. No one on the planet had the abilities and powers to take out Izuku and cut his arm off. This is surely the work of a being of another realm. Who do you suspect? First bet goes on to the frost giants. They are strong, and the chilly snow we found in the enemy hideout confirms it, but they should have not been able to do it. Even if Izuku had lost his powers stored in the hammer, he still had Asgardian physique, and not to mention his quirk. So any other person we should be wary about. Odin was about to speak, but was cut off by the door opening. Malekith. Everyone looked over to Izuku, who stood there unfazed, giving everyone the cold eye. Malekith. Yes, Odin, it was Malekith. He was the one who defeated me along with the others present there. Is Eri safe? Momo came forward with Izuku looking at her. She is safe and with Aizawa sensei right now. Izuku, did Malekith say anything to you? Yes, he sent a message that your past had caught up, Odin. Your greatest fear has returned and is ready to end you. He has given you time to face it and survive after it is done, and you have recovered. He will enact the final stage of his plan. Izuku hung his head low. Odin stood up, grabbing the boy's shoulder. What is it? Izuku turned his head slowly. The War of the Realms. Wouldn't dare, no one, not even I, am mad enough to start a fight I cannot win. No one has ever won the War of the Realms. He has a chance. He has united all the other races in the realms, and with the help of Overhaul he has a symbiote he took from the Venom. Is he okay? Yes, my boy, he arrived not long after you left for the mission. I see, that's good because we will need him if we wish to take down the symbiote army. You all stay here and prepare to fight the war, because once more it will be fought right here on Earth. What will you do till then? try to save Asgard because Mangog is on his way. He was probably released when old Asgard was destroyed. No, yes, he is on his way. I will go to old Asgard and try to stop it midway. If I die, Izuku shall take the throne of Asgard. Kirishima lifted his hand in the middle. What is this Mangog? Odin held his head low. It's a monster formed from the hatred felt by the souls of my victims when I went through the universe as a conqueror. Is there any way to beat it? Yes, All Might, my death. They hate me, they want to end me and everything I built, but since this new Asgard was built by your son, it will spare it and only come after me. I am leaving to face my doom. May you all succeed in your war. Wait, Izuku held Odin's arm, stopping him. If you are with us on the battlefield, what chances do we have to win the war? Your chances will move from 30 to 70%. Then I am coming to fight Mangog with you. Without an arm? I'll take the destroyer's arm, it doesn't need to anyways. Fine, but what about your powers? How do we get the hammer? It hasn't been heading my summonings. Let's go visit the new owner, shall we? Izuku walked off. Behind him were his friends, and Odin arrived at the door to a fellow patient. As the door swung open, Melissa was startled as she backed away from the window. What brings you all here? Bring it back, Melissa, we are going on a mission. Bring what back? The hammer. Everyone looked at Izuku in shock as David spoke to Izuku, cutting through the crowd. What do you mean she is the new Thor? Yes, Melissa sighed, bringing the hammer back and turning herself into the mighty Thor, a female version of Thor with long blonde hair and a face mask. Happy now? Yes, how did you know? At the last moment, the hammer slipped out of my hand. I was thinking about how my actions caused your cancer, and I wished I could heal you, and so I think the hammer listened to me and came to you to heal you. That is exactly what happened. So what do you want from me? To come and join me in my fight against Mangog. It will be you, me and Odin. You in? Sure, let's go. Izuku stood in the empty space near Saturn on a chariot held by two goats, along him the mighty Thor and Odin. Izuku adjusted his new arm as Odin looked over. Ready? Born ready. Just then, smashing through an asteroid came a giant monster the size of a small house. He then rushed at the three as they prepared to fight. Part 36. Izuku looked over at the rageful beast soaring through asteroids, as for the first time he felt fear at this level. The monster was giant, his body yellow, but his face, hands and feet red, his eyes pitch black, showing a complete lack of a soul. You ready? Yes, child, let's end this. Izuku then ordered his goats to take him towards Mangog, and Izuku rammed the goat in its stomach, hitting it back as Izuku jumped off the chariot and brought his axe down onto the monster, who held up his arm and blocked the attack, but was hit from the side as Melissa had thrown her hammer, smashing Mangog back into the ruins of old Asgard, which Mangog had brought with it to show Odin his past failures. As Mangog stumbled to find his balance, he was hit in the thigh with Odin's spear. As it came down to its knees, Melissa hit its head with the hammer, smashing it into the ground and creating a crater, and as the monster tried to look up, Izuku had buried the axe in its head. Izuku then pulled the axe out of the limp body as he looked over to Odin. That was anticlimactic. You were really afraid of this? Get back. Odin then called back his spear as Izuku, who was about to tell him to relax, was hit in the side, sending him into the old castle. As he smashed through the walls, he landed in a room where he saw a small round table, but ignored it and rushed out, seeing both Odin and Melissa barely holding their own against Mangog, who was throwing punches and energy blasts everywhere. Izuku rushed forward, dodging multiple attacks, and slammed his axe deep into Mangog's gut. As the beast yelled out in pain, he pulled it to the side, tearing his stomach muscle and spilling his intestines out. Odin followed up with a strike to the chest. He then began to twist the spear, tearing the monster's heart and finishing it off. Melissa had charged up the God Blast. Both Izuku and Odin collected their weapons and jumped away from Mangog as the God Blast collided with its target and vaporized the entirety of the castle behind it. When the light dissipated, it revealed an almost dead Mangog. Only thing that was left was some pieces of skin and muscle, which were still pounding. Its head was gone. Fear began to sink in everyone's soul as they saw Mangog come back to an ever larger size than before. He rushed to Odin, punching him in the gut and sending him flying toward Titan. Then its gaze shifted to both Izuku and Melissa and rushed at them. The two were on high alert and started to avoid Mangog and not face him head on. They met in an old broken house as they rested their heads, catching a breath. That attack was almost as hot as the surface of the sun, and he survived it. None of us can put out a higher attack potency, and the hammer will not bring out its full potential in my hands, and it won't heed your calls until it completely heals me or I die. Do you think the core of the sun would be effective against it? In theory, it will get rid of everything in Mangog, his blood, his muscle, nothing would be left, but how do we take him there? Izuku smiled. Inside the castle, there is a round table used to navigate the planet and set its course to the sun. Just then the roof of the house was torn apart as Mangog smashed the inside, with both Izuku and Melissa running out from either side. Izuku threw his axe in Mangog's eyes, then calling it back, Mangog began to run after Izuku on all four. Izuku reached the edge of the island and used Black Whip on two poles to slingshot himself back towards Mangog, where he utilized Fajin, Float, and One for All at its fullest, punching Mangog in the face and breaking the island in half. Suddenly Izuku felt the island which Mangog was on begin to move, so he quickly jumped over as the island started to accelerate heading toward the white star. Melissa came out of the castle with a broken round table in her hand. The course has said he isn't going anywhere now. Let's end this. Couldn't agree more. The two of them then rushed at Mangog and began to outclass it in speed, knocking it off its balance. As they went past the new Asgard where their friends and family were saw them fly past the castle. As the island approached the sun it began to fall apart. How do we get off Midoriya? We fly off. Melissa smiled as they finally knocked back Mangog. Melissa threw the hammer and hung onto it, flying off the planet with Izuku holding her foot. They flew thousands of miles away from the planet which was sinking to the core of the sun. They thought they had done it until Izuku felt as if something grabbed his foot. He looked down to see Mangog, who had made an impossible leap from the sun all the way to Izuku and Melissa, and he then punched Melissa so hard sending her straight to the moon where she landed, creating a crater. Then Mangog grabbed Izuku by the throat and took him to the moon too, slamming him to the ground. Izuku was almost knocked out by this, and Mangog moved onto Melissa, lifting her up with both of her arms. As she resisted kicking the beast, she also tried to calm Mjolnir, but her hands were closed, and inside Mangog's hands, he opened his mouth, firing an energy beam at Melissa's chest, ripping through it, leaving a giant hole where her heart should have been, and he threw her limp body to the floor. Izuku was furious. He felt the hammer call out to him, and he called back at it. The hammer came back in his possession, and he noticed Mangog from the start of the fight was aiming at the hammer. He knew that this was the weapon Odin used to conquer the universe. To get rid of Mangog he needed to get rid of the hammer, so Izuku flew around Mangog in a circle, tying him up in Black Whip. He then attached the Black Whip to Mjolnir and landed in front of Mangog, who rushed at Izuku. Izuku simply put the hammer to his forehead. Goodbye, old friend. And threw the hammer as it went past Mangog, who was just about to punch Izuku, until it got pulled back off the moon and was directly flown to the sun. The hammer did not stop there. It led Mangog to the center of the sun, where both the cause and the result were destroyed forever. But Izuku noticed something coming out of the sun, and directly at him. He felt no fear this time as the thing landed at his feet and stopped glowing. It was the core of Mjolnir, the only pure part of the hammer that was left behind. With that, Izuku grabbed the piece and walked over to Melissa holding her hand and the core of Mjolnir. For I pray to thou, return this soul back to where it belongs. Not seeing it work, Izuku yelled in anger until a hand landed on his shoulder. Let me give it a try. Izuku then gave way to Odin, who began to glow a golden color, and soon Melissa was healed. She woke up gasping for air as she looked around. Izuku. He looked her in the eyes. Thank you for avenging me. Izuku smiled. Well, we are the Avengers, are we not? The two of them laughed, happy that the treat was over. They stood up and walked behind Odin. How could it be that you can save her, but could not save me? It was Thor's fate to die fighting the serpent, and he gave his life fully to send you back. This time it was in my power to interfere. Izuku nodded, asking, so what now? We head back and prepare for war. Right, how are we breathing here though? Melissa was also wondering the same. I created an atmosphere on the moon. Izuku and Melissa chuckled as an Asgardian ship came to pick them all up. Meanwhile, somewhere in a dark realm, a man sat on his throne drinking his wine. A dark figure came and bowed in front of him. Lord Malekith, we have news from old Asgard. What is it? Odin, Izuku and female Thor have defeated Mangog with no casualties, but Malekith threw his glass aside, standing up and grabbing the servant's hair. But what? The hammer was destroyed in the process. There is no longer a Thor. Malekith let go of the servant as he laughed, and the laugh echoed through the castle. Let me know in the comments below if you guys want the next part. Also check out my other video that has been shown and left. Thank you for watching. If you enjoyed this video please like and share this video. And have a fantastic day. Bye.